Hi everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you, so let's begin. My name is Lawrence. When my fiancée said she wanted a prenup, her reason was simple. She didn't want to risk her entire future on me. I was taken aback, but I didn't argue or question her logic. I just nodded and told her it was smart thinking because, honestly, I meant it. If someone wants legal protection before marriage, I'm not the type to make it a fight. I didn't just agree, I took action. I went to my lawyer afterward and asked him to draft a prenup that protected everything I had built before our relationship. It wasn't emotional for me. We listed everything. My lawyer put it all into a solid, airtight agreement and sent it to her side. Her lawyer called my lawyer first, then called me almost immediately. Apparently, the moment they looked through the documents, the tone in the room shifted. Her lawyer probably told her what she didn't expect to hear. I had significantly more assets than she did. Suddenly, the woman who confidently said she needed to protect her future from my supposed instability realized she had misjudged entirely who she was dealing with. That's when she tried to move the goalpost. She wanted to adjust the prenup, soften certain parts, and add protections for herself that didn't exist before. Now that she knew what I had, she suddenly felt the agreement was unfair. But to me, fairness hadn't changed. The assets were still mine before her, and the purpose of the prenup was still the same as the day she asked for it. I simply told her the prenup would remain as it was drafted. I wasn't going to rewrite my entire financial life because her assumptions turned out to be wrong, and that was where we fell out. I still remember the night I met Nadia. I went to a friend's birthday dinner with no expectations. It was supposed to be one of those simple gatherings where you show up, greet a few familiar faces, eat something decent, and go home. I wasn't dressed to impress, I wasn't in the mood for networking, and I definitely wasn't thinking about meeting anyone special. I just wanted a quiet evening away from work and the noise in my head. But life has a way of surprising you when you're not looking for anything. The moment I walked in, I noticed her. As the night went on, we ended up talking for the rest of the evening. People around us changed seats, moved into different conversations, or even left early. But she and I stayed there talking as if the rest of the room didn't exist. We discussed everything people typically talk about when they meet. There was no awkwardness, no need to force anything. The conversation flowed smoothly from one topic to the next, and I kept catching myself thinking, I didn't expect this tonight. By the time the dinner was ending, it felt strange to walk away without staying connected. We exchanged numbers, clearly knowing we wanted to talk again. From that night on, we began seeing each other regularly. Every time we met, our conversations became deeper, and our comfort with each other grew stronger. In the early days of our relationship, things grew gradually without feeling forced or rushed. We enjoyed spending time together. During that period, I was still pouring most of my energy into building my business. Every day was a mix of long hours, tight budgets, and careful planning. I lived on discipline. I stuck to routines, made calculated decisions, and avoided unnecessary spending. But I never talked much about what I owned or how much I earned. It wasn't a secret I guarded with suspicion. It was simply how I preferred to live. I've always believed that money talks too loudly in some relationships, and I didn't want that to be the foundation of ours. Nadia, on the other hand, worked a regular job with a consistent monthly income. Her co-workers respected her, her friends admired her ambition, and people often described her as someone who had her life together. She absorbed all of this, and it shaped the way she viewed us as a couple. In her mind, she was the steady one, the partner with structure and reliability. She believed her job gave her more security than my business ever could. Because I didn't show off or flash anything expensive, Nadia assumed I lived an unstable or straightforward financial life. She saw my quiet habits as signs of limitation instead of intentional discipline. She thought she was the one keeping things grounded between us, and I never bothered to challenge that idea. I didn't see any point in correcting her guesses about my money. I valued privacy, and more importantly, I valued the fact that our connection wasn't built on material things. If she liked me for who I was, without knowing any numbers, then that was even better. When we hit the 2-year mark, Nadia brought up the idea of us moving in together. She felt it's the next logical step for us. And honestly, I agreed. Things between us were steady. We enjoyed each other's company, and I liked that she was confident enough to speak about what she wanted. So I agreed without any hesitation, because we were simply continuing the path we were already on. When we finally moved into the apartment, I noticed the shift almost immediately, even though it was gradual. Nadia naturally took charge of the home space. She unpacked things in a specific way, arranged the furniture with clear preferences, and began creating routines for cleaning, grocery shopping, and how we used different parts of the house. It wasn't controlling in the harsh sense, but it was very clear that she liked being the decision-maker when it came to domestic life. She set the structure, and I didn't feel a need to challenge any of it. I've always been easygoing about the home environment, and I didn't mind letting her lead. She would make small comments about my habits. Nadia would frequently say things like, "You're so predictable," or "You always do things the same way." While she wasn't trying to insult me, she didn't know that my routines weren't random quirks. They came from years of being careful with money, building my business from the ground up, and needing structure so I wouldn't fall apart during tough times. To her, it looked like I lived on autopilot. To me, it was discipline. I didn't take her comments personally, and I didn't feel the need to explain the history behind my habits. At that time, my business was only recovering, and truthfully, I understood why she saw herself as the stable one. She had a regular paycheck, predictable hours, and a lifestyle that made sense to most people. Meanwhile, I was still trying to push my business uphill. So when she behaved like the organized and reliable one between us, I just accepted it quietly. It wasn't offensive. It was simply how things looked from her perspective. Living together didn't lead to any major fights or issues. Everything between us still felt peaceful. But the way she carried herself as the steadier partner was an early hint of how she saw herself as the anchor in the relationship. I didn't see a problem with that at the time. I was too focused on keeping my business alive and appreciating the calm we had. It didn't feel like a warning. It just felt like another part of us adjusting to living under the same roof. When I finally proposed to Nadia, we had been together for about 3 to 4 years. By then, I thought I understood her completely. So when I asked her to marry me, I expected her to be happy, but I wasn't prepared for just how big her reaction would be. She said yes. Before we even left the restaurant where I proposed, she had already taken pictures of the ring, the table, the dessert plate, and even my hands. By the time we got home, she had posted everything online. Her captions were long and emotional, full of words about love, destiny, and how she had waited her whole life for this. Her friends flooded the comments with congratulations. Her family called her nonstop. I didn't mind any of it. It was her moment, and she enjoyed every second of it. Almost immediately, Nadia jumped into wedding planning. There was no "let's rest for a week and enjoy being engaged." She opened her laptop the next morning and started listing venues. She created spreadsheets for the guest list, rough budgets, color themes, and ideas for decorations. I noticed how she became more decisive, more commanding, as if she were leading a project rather than planning a ceremony. She took control of everything, from choosing the kind of hall she wanted to deciding how many people we needed to invite. She had opinions about the spending, the program, and even how our future home should look after the wedding. I didn't fight any of it, because watching her plan with so much excitement felt good to me. She looked genuinely happy whenever she explained her ideas or showed me samples she found online. I knew she liked leading things like this, and I never felt the need to stop her or question her decisions. I saw marriage as a partnership, and to me, part of being a partner is knowing when to step back and let the other person enjoy something fully. Letting her take charge didn't make me feel less important. It simply made her happy, and at that stage, that was enough for me. On the day the prenup conversation happened, I walked into it thinking it would be another one of those simple planning sessions. We were sitting at the dining table, surrounded by notes, catalogs, and her laptop. She was talking about seating arrangements and comparing 2 different venues she liked. I remember nodding along, half focused on her words and half just feeling grateful that things were moving smoothly. That's why the moment caught me off guard. In the middle of all that casual wedding talk, she suddenly shifted gears without warning. She just looked up from her screen and said, "I want a prenup. I'm not risking my future on you. Your business is never stable." The words didn't match her relaxed tone. She said it the same way she talked about picking the right flower arrangement. But beneath that calm delivery lay the apparent assumption that she was in the stronger financial position. She believed she was taking a wise step to shield herself from potential loss. I didn't react right away. I just needed a moment to understand what she thought she was protecting herself from. I realized she had built a whole picture of us in her mind. One where she was the stable one, the organized one, the one with something valuable to lose. And she had no idea how far that picture was from reality. When I finally found the right words, I simply said, "Smart thinking." I meant it too. Prenups themselves aren't a problem. They're practical. But she heard my answer and assumed it meant I agreed with her reasoning. She thought I understood why she needed it. She thought she was making the safer choice. What she didn't know was that this casual comment had just uncovered how little she understood about me, and how much she had assumed without ever asking. And that changed everything. In the days after Nadia told me she wanted a prenup, I handled things the same way I handle everything necessary in my life, calmly and quietly. I didn't feel angry, and I didn't feel insulted. She had made a request, and I decided to treat it as a straightforward business task to be completed. So I scheduled an appointment with my lawyer, a man who had handled my finances and legal paperwork for years. When I sat down in his office, it was the first time I had ever laid out my whole financial picture for anyone outside my family. Until that moment, I had always kept those details private, even from Nadia. Not because I was hiding anything, but because I never believed that a relationship needed to revolve around numbers or assets. As we spoke, my lawyer pulled out a thick folder and started taking notes. I listed everything clearly and organized. We began with my business, specifically the equity I owned. It wasn't something flashy, but it had taken years of long nights, early mornings, and quiet sacrifices to build. Then I went over my investment portfolio, a collection of stocks and long-term funds I had been contributing to since my early 20s. After that, I told him about the 2 properties I had purchased long before I met Nadia. One was a small rental home, and the other was a modest apartment building. Both were steady investments that gave me stability during the rough years of my business. Next, I mentioned the trust my grandmother left me. It wasn't a fortune, but it was her way of giving me a head start in life. I had always kept it untouched out of respect. Then came my retirement accounts, the savings I had built slowly over time because I wanted to be responsible no matter what happened in my life. And finally, I told him about the cash reserves I had set aside. They weren't meant to impress anyone. They were simply part of the disciplined system I had followed for years to make sure I never hit rock bottom again. Throughout the entire meeting, I didn't feel a single spark of desire to prove anything. It wasn't about teaching Nadia a lesson or showing her who had more. It was simply me responding to her request as directly and honestly as possible. She wanted a prenup that protected her future, so I drafted a prenup that protected mine. To me, it was that straightforward. My lawyer worked through the details and prepared a tight, thorough agreement. It covered every asset I owned and clearly stated that everything I had built before the relationship would remain mine. It wasn't aggressive or unfair. It was simply logical. Once the final document was ready, he sent it to Nadia's legal team. I didn't add a note or try to soften anything with explanations. I just let the document speak for itself. After all, she had asked for transparency, and I had delivered precisely that. When Nadia finally got the call from her lawyer, I wasn't there, but I can tell you exactly how things unfolded because of what happened right after. Her lawyer called her privately before contacting mine. That alone already told me something was off, because lawyers usually go through the official channels. But this time, hers wanted to speak to her first, to prepare her. And honestly, I understand why. She walked into that conversation thinking she was about to hear confirmation that the prenup would protect her from my so-called unstable financial situation. Instead, she heard the exact opposite. From what I was later told, Her lawyer didn't even try to sugarcoat it. They went straight to the point. Your fiancé has significantly more assets than you. I imagine she probably frowned or laughed at first, thinking it was a misunderstanding. But then the lawyer added, quite a lot more. About 10 times more. That number hit her like a brick. She had built this picture in her head where she was the steady one, the responsible one, the person with something to lose. And that entire idea collapsed on the spot. Everything she assumed about our financial dynamic was suddenly exposed as completely and painfully wrong. The part that stung her the most wasn't the prenup. It was the shock of realizing she had been moving through the relationship with a confidence built on a false idea. She had told people she was the stable one. She had spoken about me as if I needed her guidance. She had pushed for a prenup because she thought she was protecting herself. And now she was learning that I was the one with more to lose, not her. That kind of reversal hits the ego harder than anything else. She felt exposed, angry, confused. And the anger wasn't really about me hiding anything, because I never did. I never bragged. I never corrected her assumptions because I wasn't bothered by them. But for her, realizing that she had been wrong all along felt like an attack on her pride. She wasn't upset that I had assets. She was worried that reality didn't fit the image she created. She thought she was marrying someone with less. When Nadia finally confronted me, it happened in a way that made it clear she had been holding everything in until she couldn't anymore. Immediately, she walked into the room. I sensed that the conversation was not going to be calm, and before I could even ask what was wrong, she threw the first accusation at me. You hid things from me. She had just learned the truth about my finances from her lawyer, and instead of processing it quietly, she came straight at me with blame. She stood over me like she was waiting for me to crumble under her words, like she expected guilt to wash over me. But nothing in what she said actually made sense to me. I hadn't lied to her. She had always assumed things on her own. I stayed seated, watching her as she paced and repeated the accusation. When I finally spoke, I kept my tone steady, because raising my voice wouldn't fix anything. I told her, you asked for full transparency. I provided it. And that was the truth. She wanted a prenup. A prenup requires honesty. I gave exactly what she asked for. To me, it was a simple chain of actions. There was no hidden meaning, no trick, no trap. But I could tell from a look on her face that this explanation wasn't what she wanted. She wasn't upset that I had assets. She was upset that she didn't know. She was angry that her picture of the relationship had been built on assumptions she created by herself. Instead of calming down, she shifted into demands. She said she wanted changes to the prenup. She wanted more protection for herself. She wanted rights to future earnings. She wanted certain limits adjusted so that the agreement worked in her favor. The more she talked, the clearer it became that her issue wasn't the prenup. It was that the financial reality didn't match her belief that she was the one bringing stability to the relationship. The moment she learned I had more, everything changed in her mind. And now she wanted the document reshaped so she wouldn't feel like she was losing something. I listened to everything she asked for, and when she finally paused, waiting for me to agree, I told her plainly that the prenup stays as it is. It protects what I built before you. If you're uncomfortable, we don't have to get married. I didn't say it to hurt her or scare her. I said it because there was nothing unfair about the document, and there was nothing unjust about protecting the things I had worked for long before she ever entered my life. In that moment, I wasn't trying to win. I wasn't trying to teach her a lesson. I was simply drawing a clear line and letting her decide what she wanted to do with it. When I refused to change the prenup, everything in Nadia seemed to crack at once. It was like the calm version of her I knew disappeared overnight. She didn't take a moment to think things through or ask why I felt the way I did. Instead, she went straight into anger. It was the type where every word becomes an accusation. She told me I was manipulating her. She said I had planned all of this from the beginning, as if I had some secret strategy to embarrass her. She even insisted that I only agreed to the prenup because I wanted to trap her later. None of it made sense, but she said it with so much emotion that logic didn't matter anymore. She kept repeating that I didn't trust her. Each time she said it, Her voice got louder, like she needed the volume to make it feel true. She called me selfish for protecting what I built before we ever met. She even claimed that I hid my assets on purpose to make her look foolish. What stood out the most was how fast she turned the whole situation into a story where she was the victim and I was the villain. It didn't matter what I said or didn't say, she had already decided what she wanted the narrative to be. It didn't stop with me. Nadia started reaching out to our mutual friends. She told them I had blindsided her and made her feel unsafe. She said I had lied about who I was for years. When they asked me about it, I kept my answer simple or didn't respond at all. I wasn't going to turn my relationship into a public debate. I wasn't going to trade insults back and forth like teenagers. I stayed quiet because I knew arguing would only feed the fire she had started. Then her family got involved. They called me, sent long messages, and tried to guilt-trip me into changing the prenup. They said things like, "A marriage needs compromise," or "Why can't you be reasonable?" What they didn't know was that their version of compromise meant I should give up the protections she wanted for herself. Protections she no longer liked once she discovered I had more. They didn't ask about my side of the story. Nadia had already painted a picture of me as cold and unkind, and her family reacted to that version of me. Through all of this, I remained calm. Not because I didn't feel anything, but because getting emotional wouldn't fix the truth. I didn't defend myself to her friends. I didn't try to convince her family of anything. I kept my decisions clear and my distance firm. I knew that once someone decided you're the enemy, nothing you say would change their mind. And honestly, watching her spiral in this way made something obvious to me. She never wanted a fair prenup. That realization stayed with me. It was the moment I finally understood the gap between who I thought she was and who she really had the potential to be when things didn't go her way. By the time we reached the last round of arguments, I wasn't angry anymore. I was just tired. We had spent weeks going back and forth about the prenup, her asking for changes, me explaining calmly why the agreement needed to stay the way it was. Each conversation felt like we were walking in circles. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't insult her, and I didn't take any cheap shots. I kept repeating one thing. The document protects what I built long before she came into my life. But it became clear she wasn't listening to understand. She was listening to win something, to get something, to maintain some kind of balance. She thought she needed to feel secure, or at least superior. So one evening, after another round of long arguments and emotional accusations, I told her the truth as clearly as possible. I said, either sign it or we don't get married. It wasn't an ultimatum born out of anger. It wasn't a threat. It was just reality. Because a marriage built on pressure, resentment, and fear wasn't a marriage I wanted. And the longer I looked at the situation, the clearer it became that if she felt the need to protect herself from me, then we probably had no business becoming husband and wife in the first place. She refused to sign. She didn't even hesitate. And once she said no, something inside me settled. It was like a switch flipped. I simply accepted the situation for what it was. I walked away from the engagement, from the wedding plans, from the shared future we had imagined. It hurt to admit it was over, but the truth was simple. The relationship had already ended the moment trust turned into suspicion. After everything fell apart, people started asking her what happened. Instead of telling the truth, she told everyone I had lied to her, manipulated her, and used the prenup to trap her. She said I cared more about money than I did about her. She even claimed I had planned everything from the beginning, as if I had spent for years building some kind of financial ambush. Hearing these things from mutual friends didn't upset me. Honestly, it barely registered. By then, I was already mentally detached. I understood she needed to protect her pride and save face. If blaming me helped her feel better, I wasn't going to fight her on it. I had no interest in correcting her story. I just wanted peace. After the dust had settled, I spent much time thinking about what the whole situation had revealed. The prenup wasn't the problem. The issue was everything the prenup brought to light. It showed me that she had made many assumptions about me, my finances, stability, and capabilities. She'd always believed she was the more secure one, the more organized one, the person carrying the relationship in terms of responsibility. Learning that I had more than she thought didn't just surprise her, it bothered her. It created a kind of discomfort in her that I didn't see coming. It also exposed a level of entitlement I had ignored for years. She wasn't asking for fairness. She was asking for an advantage. She wanted to protect what she thought she had while expecting access to everything I had. And when she found out the scales were not tilted in her favor, her attitude changed. Suddenly, the prenup she requested became unfair in her eyes. She wanted to renegotiate not because it was wrong, but because it no longer benefited her as she had imagined. What stood out the most was how much she struggled with the idea of me having more than she expected. It wasn't jealousy. It was discomfort. She didn't know how to operate in a partnership where she wasn't the one in control or the better one. That was something I never noticed before, and it became impossible to ignore once everything was out in the open. After the breakup, I went back to therapy. Therapy helped me reconnect with myself. I threw myself back into my work, focusing on what I had built, what I still wanted to accomplish, and the life I wanted. I returned to the same calm routine that had always kept me grounded. And honestly, I felt no bitterness. No part of me wished things had happened differently. Walking away didn't feel like losing a fiancé. It felt like stepping out of a situation that could have become a long-term problem. I wasn't angry. I wasn't resentful. I was relieved. It became clear that the marriage we were planning would never have been a true partnership. The prenup didn't break us. It revealed us. And once I saw the truth, leaving wasn't painful. It was clarity.